We want to introduce our expert for this hour, Mitch Kokai, who is a man of many talents, but formerly the Director of Communications, the Senior Political Analyst at John Locke Foundation. Mr. Kokai, thank you so much for joining us. We're talking a little bit about redistricting, and I know it isn't on the ballot right now, but it will shape how North Carolinians vote. And of course, there are other states at play. Let's just start with North Carolina. We did this in the last couple of years as well. This was something when we redistrict these maps, or redraw them, I should say. This usually happened every 10 years. So let's start there. Why are we seeing this more often than not now?
Well, we have seen redistricting happen much more often than you would expect for decades now because of a number of court cases. Decades ago, back when Democrats were in charge of the North Carolina General Assembly, Republicans would often challenge Democrats' congressional and legislative election maps. Sometimes they'd be successful, sometimes not. But when they were successful, then the Democrats would have to redraw the districts, and we would see changes along the way. Once Republicans took control of the General Assembly after the 2010 election and won the power to draw the maps themselves, rather than changing the process, they basically did the same thing that the Democrats used to do to them, and that is draw districts that were designed to help boost Republicans and hurt Democrats in the next election. Democrats went to court and challenged them as unconstitutional. Sometimes they were successful, sometimes not, but we have seen a series of lawsuits challenging each map that comes along the way. And in this particular instance, the main reason that we're seeing a redrawing is not because of legal action, which caused a redraw, as you alluded to, as recently as for the 2024 election. We saw new congressional and legislative election maps, but this time we saw a new congressional election map largely because of President Trump. President Trump publicly went to the leaders of Republican-run states where Republicans draw election maps and said, hey, why don't you redraw your maps to help us get more Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives, make it more likely that Republicans could keep control of the House after the 2026 elections. You saw that Texas responded and decided to do that, to add more Republicans in Texas. We saw then a counter response from California, which has used an independent redistricting commission, but they decided, let's put it before the voters of California to see if they could be a good idea for California to redraw the maps to add more Democrats. And then other states then followed suit, including North Carolina. What was interesting with North Carolina's congressional election map was prior to the 2023 redraw, we had a U.S. House delegation that, because of some court-ordered districts, we had 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans in our House delegation. After the court-drawn map was done, Republicans went back in 2023, redrew an election map that basically gave them 3 more Republicans and the chance for a 4th. They drew a map that was basically designed to elect 10 Republicans, 3 Democrats with 1 swing district. The Democrats won that 1 swing district last time around, so it's a 10-4 map. And really, their only opportunity this time around was to draw a new election map that might squeeze out 1 more Republican for the Republicans on Capitol Hill. That's what they did. They took 2 districts in eastern North Carolina, the 1st and the 3rd. They made the 3rd district a little bit less Republican and made the 1st district more Republican with the hopes of flipping the 1st district from Democrat to Republican. And that is their answer to the call from President Trump to try to get more Republicans elected in Congress. One other note that's important here is that Republicans have been very open about this being political and being partisan. And the reason they're doing that is because both the North Carolina Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court have said in recent court cases that they're not going to deal with anything that is partisan gerrymandering. They've said that's a political question. It's not something the courts are ever going to deal with again. So if you actively, as a person drawing these maps, say you're acting in a partisan fashion, they believe that they are protected from court cases, which means that if there's going to be a successful challenge against this map or others, they have to be done in terms of calling it racial gerrymandering, or much less likely even to succeed than racial gerrymandering, malapportionment, meaning there are too many people in some districts, too few people in others. But that is basically why we're here. Lots of court cases, and President Trump, shocker, President Trump, as in many other areas, is driving what's happening in politics.
A lot of information there, Mr. Kokai. So let's kind of unpack this a little bit. For the entire state, what does it mean? Let's start there and open this up. Now, resulting in this map passing, right? You alluded to the Supreme Court, and there is, I do believe, more action to be taken on the Voting Rights Act that could be taken away. Part of that, which I guess relates to this bigger conversation that we're having, right? And this is not just happening in North Carolina. I want to let our viewers know that a lot of southeastern rural states, this seems to be, obviously, as you said, it is protected under the Supreme Court, but it seems to be that this is a dilution of the influence of black voters in these type of states, specifically in North Carolina, the state's northeasternmost district, the first district, which has been obviously represented by black Americans for the last couple of years, if I can remember correctly. Anyway, let's talk about that, right? So if this map does pass, there has been arguments made that this will dilute black voters and their vote going forward. What would you say to that in terms of where this is headed? Because as you pointed out, I don't think this is this is going to stop. This is politics as we know it, and for the foreseeable future, we're probably stuck here. What do you think?
Yeah, a number of things to point out. You're exactly right that the U.S. Supreme Court is dealing with this issue. There is a case out of Louisiana, and what the Supreme Court says in that case could help decide the future of any success or failure of cases that go forward claiming racial gerrymandering, saying that there was an unconstitutional use of race in drawing election districts. That is what's being alleged in the North Carolina case, and is what is alleged in a number of the other cases where Republicans have drawn districts and Democrats don't like them. They say, well, you're drawing based on race. The Constitution does not permit that. If the U.S. Supreme Court says something different in this Louisiana case about what the Voting Rights Act actually protects, that would affect all future redistricting litigation here in North Carolina and elsewhere. As for what's going on in North Carolina, that first district, which is the Northeastern District, has been represented by an African American since the early 1990s. The 1992 redistricting, which was done after the 1990 census, that was the first time that North Carolina drew districts that were designed to be majority-minority. So they drew a district that had been represented by Democrats for a long time, but always white Democrats. They drew a district that was designed to help elect an African American. It turned out that they also had to draw a second majority-minority district, and people who've lived in North Carolina a long time, and in that Charlotte area, they'll definitely remember this because this affected Charlotte. That's why we ended up with this crazy snake district that originally went from Durham all the way to Gastonia, basically along I-85. Later, it was shortened. It went from Greensboro to Charlotte, but that was the second majority-minority district. But that first district, the one that's affected by this latest map, was designed initially for the 1992 election to elect an African American, and it has elected African Americans ever since. Now, it's important to point out that the last map, the current map that was drawn for the 2024 election, was not drawn with race in mind. It was drawn, Republicans have said throughout, it was drawn politically. It was designed to be a swing district. As it turned out, the incumbent from the previous map, Don Davis, is an African American. He was able to win re-election, so he kept that string alive of an African American serving in that district. But now Republicans have said for their last two map drawing processes, they didn't use race. And so if you look at the map, what happened with this latest map, the one that is being proposed for, or that's been passed, and if the courts allow it to hold, it'll be used for 2026, a handful of districts from the third district were moved into the first district. A handful of counties that were in the first district were moved to the third district. And the critics are saying is that what the Republican legislature did was they took a lot of the African American voters out of the first district, moved them into the third district where they're going to be diluted, and then moved a lot more white dominated counties into the first district, and in both cases made the two districts more Republican and less likely to elect an African American. The response from the Republican legislature is, we did this all for partisan reasons. We're just trying to elect another Republican, and the courts have said it's okay if we're partisan. The lawsuits that are challenging this and the critics are saying, no, you're using that as an excuse. What you're really doing is racial gerrymandering, and the courts have said you can't do that. And this is something that the courts are going to end up resolving. It's a case that's right now before a 3-judge panel of judges. I think regardless of what that panel ends up saying in the coming weeks, it's going to get appealed. And so the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, which has been more critical of the General Assembly, will probably have something to say about it. And I would not be surprised if this ends up getting back to the U.S. Supreme Court and they could have the ultimate say about whether what North Carolina has done is going to be deemed constitutional or not. But redistricting is something that we've been dealing with almost year in and year out now for decades.
Right, but it I guess, in my opinion, it doesn't seem like it's been this constrained for people, right? So, I guess the conversation going forward to 2026 that a lot of people are asking, is my vote going to count, right? What can people do? I mean, I live in South Carolina. There were a number of things on the ballot today, referendums, road widening things that I'm sure a lot of folks were looking at how their property taxes are going to affect them, right? It's totally different when you're thinking about these local elections, but it can and will affect the midterm election in 2026, this new congressional map. So the simple question is, what can I do, other than just voting, if this does, in fact, and there, I guess you kind of pointed out that it does dilute certain individuals' votes because of where they live. That's just a fact. What should folks do?
Well, I mean, they will vote the way that they want to vote. I think one of the things that we've seen is over the years, a lot of people are not really thrilled with the way that election maps are drawn, would like to see them drawn in a different way to take the partisanship out of it. But neither party has been interested in doing that when they've been in power. Democrats, even in the years when it looked like they might lose power, have not been all that inclined to change the way that the maps are drawn. And Republicans, once they took power after the 2010 elections, decided that they weren't going to change the system either. They were going to draw the maps exactly the way that they wanted to help maximize advantages for Republicans and to hurt the Democrats. So really, the only thing that people could do is, if this is a big issue for them, make sure that their legislators know about it and say, okay, if you're not going to be willing to reform, we're not going to vote for you anymore. And so far, that's not happened. Republicans, even if they, in the abstract, like the idea of redistricting reform, like having Republicans in office more than they like redistricting reform. And I think that was probably true of the Democrats, too, in the past when they were in charge. They might like the idea of redistricting reform in the abstract, but when it came to whether Democrats or Republicans would be in charge, they were more likely to want their party to be in charge. Now, for folks in your viewing area, probably there's not going to be a whole lot of difference in the way that your congressional map is playing out, because nothing in the new map changed anything about the map that we used last time around outside of eastern North Carolina and those two districts, the first and the third, where several of the counties were swapped. So those folks will face changes. People in the Triangle and the Triad and the Charlotte area and out in western North Carolina, the map looks exactly the same as what they saw in 2024.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting how this plays out. And as you pointed out, again, I think each side plays into this, which is why we're here. I mean, you got to give a little bit on each side to be, it's compromise. I learned that in marriage. So you got to give a little bit, right?
Yeah, and of course, I mean, we're considered a conservative organization, the John Locke Foundation. It's actually free market, limited government, but we're considered a conservative group. So a lot of people think, well, you should be with the Republicans. But we have been for redistricting reform for years. We were
Yeah.
for redistricting reform when the Democrats were in charge and used it
Right.
to keep Republicans down. We're for redistricting reform now that Republicans are using it to limit the Democrats' impact. I think it would be better for all concerned if we came up with a group of a set of rules that governed redistricting, that tried to take partisanship out of it as much as possible, so that the districts would all be as compact as possible, keep communities of interest together to the extent that that's possible, keep counties together. And when you look at the map, you look at it and go, yeah, that makes sense, rather than, well, why is this little squiggly line going around here? And
Yeah.
why are these counties that are so far apart together? That comes about because of partisan politics. If you took the partisan information out of it, I think people might not be all that happy, but at least they would understand it, and their grumbling would be a little bit less.
Right. I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, we just need to come back to the middle in some sense with common sense, because, you know, if you give the feeling to people that their vote or they're being disenfranchised, right, you don't want to give anybody that feeling. And really it just ruins the overall cornerstone of democracy that our forefathers built this country on. So that's the values that we're sticking to, and appreciate again your expert advice. We'll see where this election cycle goes. Happy election day to you, Mr. Koch. I appreciate your time again. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.